May our Father, Messiah, and the Holy Spirit be with us. 2 Kings chapter 16. In the 17th year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, Ahaz, son of Jotham, became king of Judah. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. And unlike David, his father, he did not do what was right in the eyes of our Father in heaven, his God. Instead, he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel and even sacrificed his son in the fire, according to the abominations of the nations that our Father in heaven had driven out before the Israelites. And he sacrificed and burned incense on the high places, on the hills, and under every green tree. Then Rezin, king of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, came up to wage war against Jerusalem. They besieged Ahaz, but could not overcome him. At that time, Rezin, king of Aram, recovered Elath for Aram, drove out the men of Judah, and sent the Edomites to Elath, where they live to this day. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I am your servant and your son. Come up and save me from the hands of the kings of Aram and Israel, who are rising up against me. Ahaz also took the silver and gold found in the house of our Father in heaven and in the treasuries of the king's palace, and he sent it as a gift to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria responded to him, marched up to Damascus, and captured it. He took its people to Kir as captives and put Rezin to death. Then King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. On seeing the altar in Damascus, King Ahaz sent Uriah the priest a model of the altar and complete plans for its construction. And Uriah the priest built the altar according to all the instructions King Ahaz had sent from Damascus, and he completed it by the time King Ahaz had returned. When the king came back from Damascus and saw the altar, he approached it and presented offerings on it. He offered his burnt offering and his grain offering, poured out his drink offering, and sprinkled the blood of his peace offerings on the altar. He also took the bronze altar that stood before our Father in heaven from the front of the temple, between the new altar and the house of our Father in heaven, and he put it on the north side of the new altar. Then King Ahaz commanded Uriah the priest, offer on the great altar the morning burnt offering, the evening grain offering, and the king's burnt offering and grain offering, as well as the burnt offerings, grain offerings, and drink offerings of all the people of the land. Sprinkle on the altar all the blood of the burnt offerings and sacrifices, but I will use the bronze altar to seek guidance. So Uriah the priest did just as King Ahaz had commanded. King Ahaz also cut off the frames of the movable stands and removed the bronze basin from each of them. He took down the sea from the bronze oxen that were under it and put it on a stone base. And on account of the king of Assyria, he removed the Sabbath canopy they had built in the temple and closed the royal entryway outside the house of our Father in heaven. As for the rest of the acts of Ahaz, along with his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Ahaz rested with his fathers and was buried with them in the city of David, and his son Hezekiah reigned in his place. 2 Kings chapter 17. In the 12th year of the reign of Ahaz over Judah, Hoshea, son of Elah, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 9 years. And he did evil in the sight of our Father in heaven, but not like the kings of Israel who preceded him. Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, attacked him, and Hoshea became his vassal and paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria discovered that Hoshea had conspired to send envoys to King So of Egypt, and that he had not paid tribute to the king of Assyria as in previous years. Therefore, the king of Assyria arrested Hoshea and put him in prison. Then the king of Assyria invaded the whole land, marched up to Samaria, and besieged it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and carried away the Israelites to Assyria, where he settled them in Halah, in Gozan by the Habor River, and in the cities of the Medes. All of this happened because the people of Israel had sinned against our Father in heaven, their God, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. They had worshipped other gods and walked in the customs of the nations that our Father in heaven had driven out before the Israelites, as well as in the practices introduced by the kings of Israel. The Israelites secretly did things against our Father in heaven, their God, that were not right. From watchtower to fortified city, they built high places in all their cities. They set up for themselves sacred pillars and Asherah poles on every high hill under every green tree. They burnt incense on all the high places like the nations that our Father in heaven had driven out before them. They did wicked things, provoking our Father in heaven to anger. They served idols, although our Father in heaven had told them, "You shall not do this thing." Yet through all his prophets and seers, our Father in heaven warned Israel and Judah, saying, "Turn from your wicked ways and keep my commandments and statutes according to the entire law that I commanded your fathers and delivered to you through my servants, the prophets." But they would not listen, and they stiffened their necks like their fathers, who did not believe our Father in heaven, their God. They rejected his statutes and the covenant he had made with their fathers, as well as the decrees he had given them. They pursued worthless idols and themselves became worthless, going after the surrounding nations that our Father in heaven had commanded them not to imitate. They abandoned all the commandments of our Father in heaven, their God, and made for themselves 2 cast idols of calves and an Asherah pole. They bowed down to all the host of heaven and served Baal. They sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire and practiced divination and soothsaying. They devoted themselves to doing evil in the sight of our Father in heaven, provoking him to anger. So our Father in heaven was very angry with Israel, and he removed them from his presence. Only the tribe of Judah remained. And even Judah did not keep the commandments of our Father in heaven, their God, but lived according to the customs Israel had introduced. So our Father in heaven rejected all the descendants of Israel. He afflicted them and delivered them into the hands of plunderers until he had banished them from his presence. When our Father in heaven had torn Israel away from the house of David, they made Jeroboam, son of Nebat, king. And Jeroboam led Israel away from following our Father in heaven and caused them to commit a great sin. The Israelites persisted in all the sins that Jeroboam had committed and did not turn away from them. Finally, our Father in heaven removed Israel from his presence, as he had declared through all his servants, the prophets. So Israel was exiled from their homeland into Assyria, where they are to this day. Then the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim, and settled them in the towns of Samaria to replace the Israelites. They took possession of Samaria and lived in its towns. Now, when the settlers first lived there, they did not worship our Father in heaven. So he sent lions among them, which killed some of them. So they spoke to the king of Assyria, saying, "The peoples that you have removed and placed in the cities of Samaria do not know the requirements of the God of the land. Because of this, he has sent lions among them, which are indeed killing them off." Then the king of Assyria commanded, "Send back one of the priests you carried off from Samaria, and have him go back to live there and teach the requirements of the God of the land." Thus one of the priests they had carried away came and lived in Bethel, and he began to teach them how they should worship our Father in heaven. Nevertheless, the people of each nation continued to make their own gods in the cities where they had settled, and set them up in the shrines that the people of Samaria had made on the high places. The men of Babylon made Succoth Benoth. The men of Cuth made Nergal. The men of Hamath made Ashima. The Avites made Nibhas and Tartak. And the Sepharvites burned their children in the fire to Adramelech and Anamelech, the gods of the Sepharvaim. So the new residents worshipped our Father in heaven, but they also appointed for themselves priests of all sorts to serve in the shrines of the high places. They worshipped our Father in heaven, but they also served their own gods according to the customs of the nations from which they had been carried away. To this day, they are still practicing their former customs. None of them worship our Father in heaven or observe the statutes, ordinances, laws, and commandments that our Father in heaven gave the descendants of Jacob, who he named Israel. For our Father in heaven had made a covenant with the Israelites and commanded them, do not worship other gods or bow down to them. Do not serve them or sacrifice to them. Instead, worship your Father in heaven, who brought you out of the land of Egypt with great power and an outstretched arm. You are to bow down to him and offer sacrifices to him. And you must always be careful to observe the statutes, ordinances, laws, and commandments he wrote for you. Do not worship other gods. Do not forget the covenant I had made with you. Do not worship other gods, but worship your Father in heaven, your God, and he will deliver you from the hands of all your enemies. But they would not listen, and they persisted in their former customs. So these nations worshiped our Father in heaven, but also served their idols. And to this day, their children and grandchildren continue to do as their fathers did. 2 Kings chapter 18. In the 3rd year of the reign of Hoshea, son of Elah, over Israel, Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, became king of Judah. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah, and he did what was right in the eyes of our Father in heaven, just as his father David had done. He removed the high places, shattered the sacred pillars, and cut down the Asherah poles. He also demolished the bronze snake called Nehushtan that Moses made, for up to that time the Israelites had burned incense to it. Hezekiah trusted in our Father in heaven, the God of Israel. No king of Judah was like him, either before him or after him. He remained faithful to our Father in heaven and did not turn from following him. He kept the commandments that our Father in heaven had given Moses. And our Father in heaven was with Hezekiah, and he prospered wherever he went. He rebelled against the king of Syria and refused to serve him. He defeated the Philistines as far as Gaza and its borders, from watchtower to fortified city. In the 4th year of Hezekiah's reign, which was the 7th year of the reign of Hoshea, son of Elah, over Israel, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, marched against Samaria and besieged it. And at the end of 3 years, the Assyrians captured it. So Samaria was captured in the 6th year of Hezekiah, which was the 9th year of the king of Hoshea, king of Israel. The king of Assyria exiled the Israelites to Assyria and settled them in Halah, in Gozan by the Habor River, and in the cities of the Medes. This happened because they did not listen to the voice of our Father in heaven, their God, but violated his covenant, all that Moses, the servant of our Father in heaven, had commanded, and would neither listen nor obey. In the 14th year of Hezekiah's reign, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked and captured all the fortified cities of Judah. So Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent word to the king of Israel at Lachish, saying, I have done wrong. Withdraw from me, and I will pay whatever you demand from me. And the king of Assyria exacted from Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of our Father in heaven and in the treasuries of the royal palace. At that time, Hezekiah stripped the gold with which had been plated, which he had plated the floors and doorposts of the temple of our Father in heaven, and he gave it to the king of Assyria. Nevertheless, the king of Assyria sent the Tartan, the Rabsaris, and the Rabshakeh, along with a great army, from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem. They advanced up to Jerusalem and stationed themselves by the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the launderer's field. Then they called for the king, and Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shebna, the scribe, and Joah, son of Asaph, the recorder, went out to them. The Rabshakeh said to them, "Tell Hezekiah that this is what the great king, the king of Assyria, says. What is the basis of this confidence of yours? You claim to have a strategy and strength for war, but these are empty words. In whom are you now trusting that you have rebelled against me? Look now, you are trusting in Egypt, that splintered reed of a staff that will pierce the hand of anyone who leans on it. Such is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who trust in him. But if you say to me, we trust in our Father in heaven, our God, is he not the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah has removed, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, you must worship before this altar in Jerusalem? Now, therefore, make a bargain with my master, the king of Assyria, and I will give you 2,000 horses, if you can put riders on them. For how can you repel a single officer among the least of my master's servants when you depend on Egypt for chariots and horsemen? So now, was it apart from our Father in heaven that I have come up against this place to destroy it? Our Father in heaven himself said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. Then Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, along with Shebna and Joah, said to the Rabshakeh, please speak to your servants in Aramaic, since we understand it. Do not speak to us in Hebrew in the hearing of the people on the wall. But the Rabshakeh replied, has my master sent me to speak these words only to you and your master, and not to the men sitting on the wall who are destined with you to eat their own dung and drink their own urine? Then the Rabshakeh stood and called out loudly in Hebrew, hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. This is what the king says. Do not let Hezekiah deceive you. He cannot deliver you from my hand. Do not let Hezekiah persuade you to trust in your Father in heaven when he says, your Father in heaven will surely deliver us. This city will not be given into the hand of King Assyria. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for this is what the king of Assyria says. Make peace with me and come out to me. Then every one of you will eat from his own vine and his own fig tree, and drink water from his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey, so that you may live and not die. But do not listen to Hezekiah, for he misleads you when he says your Father in heaven will deliver us. Has the God of any nation ever delivered his land from the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Avah? Have they delivered Samaria from my hand? Who among all the gods of these lands has delivered his land from my hand? How then can your Father in heaven deliver Jerusalem from my hand? But the people remained silent and did not answer a word, for Hezekiah had commanded, do not answer him. Then Hilkiah's son, Eliakim, the palace administrator, Shebna, the scribe, and Asaph's son, Joah, the recorder, came to Hezekiah with their clothes torn, and they relayed to him the words of the Rabshakeh. 2 Kings chapter 19. On hearing this report, King Hezekiah tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and entered the house of our Father in heaven. And he sent Eliakim, the palace administrator, Shebna the scribe, and the leading priests, all wearing sackcloth, to the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, to tell him, "This is what Hezekiah says. Today is a day of distress, rebuke, and disgrace. For children have come to the point of birth, but there is no strength to deliver them. Perhaps our Father in heaven, your God, will hear all the words of the Rabshakeh, from whom his master, the king of Assyria, has sent to defy the living God. And he will rebuke him for the words that our Father in heaven, your God, has heard. Therefore, lift up a prayer for the remnant that still survives." So the servants of King Hezekiah went to Isaiah, who replied, "Tell your master that this is what our Father in heaven says. Do not be afraid of the words you have heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Behold, I will put a spirit in him, so that he will hear a rumor and return to his own land, where I will cause him to fall by the sword." When the Rabshakeh heard that the king of Assyria had left Lachish, he withdrew and found the king fighting against Libnah. Now Sennacherib had been warned about Tirhakah, king of Cush. "Look, he has set out to fight against you." So Sennacherib again sent messengers to Hezekiah, saying, "Give this message to Hezekiah, king of Judah. Do not let your God, in whom you trust, deceive you by saying that Jerusalem will not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. Surely you have heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all the other countries, devoting them to destruction. Will you then be spared? Did the gods of the nations destroyed by my fathers rescue those nations? The gods of Gozan, Haran, and Reseph, and of the people of Eden and Telassar? Where are the kings of Hamath, Arpad, and Sepharvaim, Hena, and Avah?" So Hezekiah received the letter from the messengers, read it, and went up to the house of our Father in heaven and spread it out before our Father in heaven. And Hezekiah prayed before our Father in heaven, "O Father, God of Israel, enthroned between the cherubim, you alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You made the heavens and the earth. Incline your ear, O Father, and hear. Open your eyes, O Father, and see. Listen to the words that Sennacherib has sent to defy the living gods. Truly, O Father, the kings of Assyria have laid waste these nations and their lands. They have cast their gods into the fire and destroyed them. For they were not gods, but only wood and stone, the work of human hands. And now, Father, our God, please save us from his hand, so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone, our Father in heaven, are God." Then Isaiah, son of Amos, sent a message to Hezekiah. "This is what our Father in heaven, the God of Israel, says. I have heard your prayer concerning Sennacherib of Assyria. This is the word that our Father in heaven has spoken against him. The virgin daughter of Zion despises you and mocks you. The daughter of Jerusalem shakes her head behind you. Whom have you taunted and blasphemed? Against whom have you raised your voice and lifted your eyes in pride? Against the Holy One of Israel. Through your servants you have taunted your Father in heaven, and you have said, with my many chariots I have ascended to the heights of the mountains, to the remote peaks of Lebanon. I have cut down its tallest cedars, the finest of its cypresses. I have reached its farthest outpost, the densest of its forest. I have dug wells and drunk foreign waters. With the soles of my feet, I have dried up all the streams of Egypt. Have you not heard? Long ago, I ordained it. In days of old, I planned it. Now I have brought it to pass that you should crush fortified cities into piles of rubble. Therefore, their inhabitants, devoid of power, are dismayed and ashamed. They are like plants in the field, tender green shoots, grass on the rooftops, scorched before it is grown. But I know you're sitting down, you're going out and coming in, and you're raging against me. Because your rage and arrogance against me have reached my ears, I will put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth. I will send you back the way you came. And this will be a sign to you, O Hezekiah. This year you will eat what grows on its own, and in the second year what springs from the same. But in the third year you will sow and reap. You will plant vineyards and eat their fruit. And the surviving remnant of the house of Judah will again take root below and bear fruit above. For a remnant will go forth from Jerusalem and survivors from Mount Zion. The zeal of our Father in heaven, the King of hosts, will accomplish this. So this is what our Father in heaven says about the king of Assyria. He will not enter this city or shoot an arrow into it. He will not come before it with a shield or build up a siege ramp against it. He will go back the way he came, and he will not enter this city, declares our Father in heaven. I will defend this city and save it for my own sake and for the sake of my servant David. And that very night, the angel of our Father in heaven went out and struck down 185,000 men in the camp of the Assyrians. When the people got up the next morning, there were all dead bodies. There were all the dead bodies. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, broke camp and withdrew. He returned to Nineveh and stayed there. One day, while he was worshiping in the temple of his god Nisroch, his sons Adramelech and Sharezer put him to the sword and escaped to the land of Ararat. And his son Esarhaddon reigned in his place. Father willing, we will continue with 2 Kings chapter 20. May our Father, Messiah, and the Holy Spirit be with us. Repent. The kingdom of heaven is near. Peace.